Richard Morwood. We've once again picked State of Origin night for one of these lean functions, which is a pretty special bloody thing. So thank you for coming along. We will endeavour to, I was thinking as I was driving across the Story Bridge this morning, we could have just Googled 13th of July events in Brisbane and figured that out, but so we'll do that next time. So thanks for coming along. This is the second of a rejuvenated Lean Construction Institute Queensland Division meeting. We had a committee meeting. Actually, there's a few introductory slides here. I'll flick through these. This is what our goals are. These are the current people on the Queensland Council. We added another one who's going to turn up to the next meeting. And we've actually got some roles within that group of people as well. So most of those people are here. Ren and Brian aren't here, although Brian's representative Rodney is here. So please talk to us afterwards. And there's some things here. We do have some membership forms on the end of the table over there where you've got your name badges. So grab one of those, have a look at that. On that website, there is some existing information on previous presentations, but also material that's been grabbed from the Lean Construction Institute in the UK and the US. So feel free to have a look at that as well. So I'll hand the clicker over to Rodney. I'll just introduce Rodney. So Rodney, interestingly, is going to do the first presentation this evening. Rodney tells me that he's over here missing a Lean Construction Institute committee meeting from Western Australia. Is that right? So we share our committee members around. Before I go any further, I would also like to particularly thank QUT and Bob for organising the venue and the audio-visual equipment and all the rest of it. I know that your school has contributed to that, so thanks, Bob. So Rodney, I'll read the words that have been given to me here, and then I'll tell you what Rodney's really like. So thanks. Rodney Mascarenhas is a senior software consultant, plant engineering at Bentley Systems. He's a mechanical engineer with about 26 years' experience in the AEC. I guess that's
just shows my age.
Engineering and construction, software industry, blend of IT skills, plant design, extensive experience in plant engineering and project management. He's gained a depth of knowledge from providing support to users of engineering software in terms of implementation, re-engineering, customization and skills transfer. Rodney will discuss the Valero Energy Corporation Refinery expansion in Houston, Texas. Valero Energy Corporation is the world's largest independent refiner, which increased productivity, reduced cost, and delivered a project on time by using WorkFace Planning Management. So thank you. And Rodney, I understand you've actually been in Australia for about 12 years.
Yes, I have.
And Bentley was involved in this Valero project for about 12 months. So
yeah.
That's the experience you're going to talk about. So thank you. I'll hand over to Rodney.
Thanks Richard. Thanks for the introduction. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming over and giving us the, of course, I'd like to thank Lean Construction Institute in Brisbane for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. We'll try and be precise and to the point. I know you guys are rushing to get home for the kickoff, so we'll try and keep it short and sweet. But at the same time, I just want to make sure that we cover all the topics that we decided to discuss today. So if you can just flick on to the next presentation. So I'll just start off with a brief safety moment. I know, especially in the oil and gas industry, the safety moment is something which is almost mandatory. When you go for any meetings or anything like that, the first few moments are just discussing a safety moment. And I thought I'd bring this up because we do a lot of traveling, and coming from Perth to Brisbane is a 5-hour flight. And sometimes we travel to the US where you could be sitting on a plane for 11 to 13 hours at a stretch. And research has shown that DVT is a pretty serious problem. If you do not have the blood circulation flowing through your legs, it could cause fatalities. So the precautions that you would normally take is make sure on a long flight you at least stretch your legs at least for in a duration, let's say every 2 hours or 1 hour, depending on how often you can get off your seat and move around the cabin. So just a few things I think which you would bear in mind in order to make things easier, especially for people who travel frequently. Okay, so let's now move on to the main topic of today, which is the work-phase planning. But before we do that, I would like to highlight a few challenges that the industry is facing in the present times. And of course, it would be an understatement just to say that we are going through tough times right now. And especially with the construction world, the competition is getting fierce. Owners are expecting more and more, or like you typically say in Australia, they're expecting more bang for their buck. Margins are declining, and of course, the impact of previous projects has been something which they have been looking at or monitoring closely. And we'll talk about the previous mega projects that have been executed and what has been the success rate in a few slides from here. And of course, collaboration. You have teams that are spread across the globe. We need to bring those teams together. So what is it that work-phase planning can help, or how can work-phase planning help in basically addressing these challenges? And of course, last but not the least, we'll be also talking about field mobility and how technology has facilitated that. Now, I'm sure this looks familiar. You have all your project execution plans, and then you expect a mini miracle to happen when it goes on to commissioning, right? And of course, when we talk about planning, it's always at the engineering phase that it is done in much detail. Even the technology basically facilitates engineering to a great degree when we have all your latest technology being adopted. But once it's handed over to construction, what do we see? We see just PDF files or maybe paper drawings. And if you go into a construction manager's office, you will still see big printouts being stuck, with most of them being updated with sticky notes or a highlighter that's overused. Yeah? And of course, when you go and approach the construction manager or the project manager, the first thing they will tell you is, sorry, we are busy. We've been doing this the way we have been doing it all the time, and we are happy doing it that way, right? But I'm sure all of you will agree that there is a need for change, right? And why that is we'll come to that in a few slides from now. But this is the response that you get when you go to any construction manager or project manager. They say, no, we're busy with work. And information overload. Okay, of course, we're talking of mega data, which is being generated almost on a daily basis, right? You have drawings that are being generated, you have Excel spreadsheets, you have data that is created on the field, data that is coming from your planning, data that is coming from ERP systems. Now, all this information is being thrown at the construction managers, and they are supposed to execute based on the information that they receive. Now, information is good, but what do we do with that? How do you handle that information? If you have to look at 3 different monitors in order to look at a spreadsheet or a 3D model or a document that has come from procurement, and how do you put that together? Okay, that's been the major challenge right now. It's not information, but it is how do you use that information that's been a major challenge. And Bentley, actually the company I work for, works closely with an independent project analysis. This is a research organization that has studied more than 318 mega projects, right? And when we say mega projects, there have been a total installed cost of more than $2 billion on each of these. And when they did a study of these projects, they realized that 65% of the projects basically failed, right? And they had certain criteria that based on which they decided whether a project is a success or a failure, right? The first criteria was to make sure that there was no budget overrun. So if there was any budget overrun of more than 25%, it was deemed to have failed. Or if there was a slippage of 25% on the schedule, then it was deemed to be failed. Or if the asset itself that was being created, if it did not perform as per the required standards, then that was again considered as a failure itself. So considering these three criteria, we had 65% of the 318 mega projects that they studied which fell in this category. So that's a big failure rate. Now, looking at these numbers, you would straight away say that yes, there is a need for change. There is a need to support construction in a way that these mistakes are not again repeated, right? Now, talking of engineering, right, we have seen the evolution move from, let's say, a drawing board in the late 80s and early 90s. From the drawing board, we moved on to a CAD system where people started, instead of doing it manually, the drafting was done in a CAD environment, so you automated drafting. From drafting, it went to 2D intelligent drawings. So people started adding engineering information onto that to make it more and more data rich. And from 2D intelligent drawings, we went to 3D modeling, okay? And now, of course, we are talking of virtual reality and stuff. And of course, if you have been keeping in touch with the news, you may have heard that the gaming industry has now moved into augmented reality, right? So if you have heard of Pokemon Go, where you have people running up with their iPhones, running around trying to search for monsters, so to speak, But the point I'm trying to make here is that will eventually come into the engineering and construction industry as well. Because the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality is that virtual reality is totally cut off from the real world, whereas augmented reality merges the real world and the virtual world together. And that is where they see the power in augmented reality. And I'm sure that's something that will definitely help the construction industry in the future. Now, what is the answer to all of these problems, basically? Why do we think that these problems occur? The main thing, and everyone will agree, is because of the information overload, there's a lack of visibility as to what is happening on the project. So there is information, but it's not in a central location. So accessing that information becomes a big challenge. And that's where, to improve visibility and predictability, is what we need to basically focus on. So let's talk about our main topic today, that is the WorkFace planning. What exactly is WorkFace planning, and how we can adopt the best practice in order to address many of the challenges that we have talked about so far. Okay. Again, of course, I'll talk about the advanced work packaging and WorkFace planning as well, and how it basically has to align with your contract specifications, how it has to streamline the systems, people, and the work processes. And of course, in order to do all of this, you need a programmatic approach. Now, this is a slide that I've taken from CII and COA, where it basically describes where this actually fits in, right? If you look at the slide here, you look on your right-hand side is where the WorkFace planning actually happens. So you basically create your installation work packages, which you basically send out to site in order to create the work. But advanced work packaging is something that happens right at the beginning, right? So it is basically bridging the gap between engineering and construction, right? So what we want to do is get construction involved in the engineering phase. So you have your last planners who basically dictate what needs to be done and in what sequence it needs to be done as well. Okay, so there's an input from construction into engineering in order to facilitate advanced work packaging. Now, many times I get asked the question, at what stage of engineering should we involve construction? Okay. Now, my answer to that always is as early as possible. Earlier the better, again, is the answer. So it could be at the front-end engineering stage itself. So you're trying to do feasibility studies, you already have a 3D model, get construction involved to define the path of construction, define the construction work areas, define what sequencing they would want, and then basically incorporate that into engineering. So that's the key in order to get people involved on all of this. I'll show you a brief video which we created. It's all animation, but basically gives you an idea of what advanced work packaging can do for you. It's a 3-minute video, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Can you please play it? Thank you.
This video will explain advanced work packaging in less than 3 minutes. Are you ready? Let's go. Meet Dave. Dave is a project manager in a large construction project. Dave's team includes engineering, procurement, fabricators, contractors, field supervisors, and construction crews. Dave is planning on a very successful project. So everyone heads to work, but no one communicates with each other. Each department is rapidly producing pieces of a very large puzzle. Those puzzle pieces are given to construction to put together and sort out. Sometimes we even give them a laptop to help out. Sometimes. Construction gets frustrated. Productivity continues to decline. And time on tools fails to improve. Poor Dave, there has to be a better way. Advanced work packaging puts in place a path of construction that the entire team agrees to by sequencing construction work areas. Traditionally, engineering produces deliverables for construction without construction inputting boundaries of construction sequence. Engaging construction earlier to collaborate produces much better results. Construction-driven engineering ensures that engineering deliverables are aligned with construction requirements. So our construction work areas are broken down into discipline-specific EWPs. Engineering work packages are produced by the engineering team. They contain technical documentation, drawings, and specifications specific to the design area. EWPs are the foundation for CWPs. Construction work packages add a budget, schedule, specialty tools, materials, safety, and resource requirements to the EWP. Our CWPs are then broken into smaller work packages that construction crews will use in the field. Installation work packages consist of 500 to 1,000 man-hours of work and contain documentation specific to that scope of work. So we break construction work areas into numerous EWPs, which we use to build CWPs, and then break those down into IWPs. Simple, right? By achieving alignment between engineering, procurement, and construction, we ensure that everyone is producing deliverables according to an agreed-upon schedule. When groups work together on the same plan, things just seem to click. Here's Jim. Jim is a WorkFace planner that is busy building IWPs. Jim uses an automation tool to easily package work and make his packages more accurate and more efficient. It also makes things easier to find. Installation work packages must have constraints identified and verified, which allows us to ensure that work packages going to the field can actually be completed. Here is Bill Foreman, who is using his IWP to allow us to be safer and more efficient, which saves the project money and makes everyone happier. Good work, Dave. Who says you can't have your cake and eat it too?
Perfect. I hope you enjoyed that video. It was all animated, but definitely conveys the message of what we are planning to do with the advanced work packaging and how it can help major projects. Now let's take a look at the definition itself of WorkFace planning. Of course, it says it's the process of organizing and delivering all the elements necessary before work is started. I think the key is before work is started, in order to enable the craftsman to perform quality work in a safe, effective, and efficient manner. Okay, so I think this is the definition, and this has come from the leading industry institutes such as COA and CII. Now, in order to create an automation tool, or in order to bring that into a virtual model, what is the information that actually has to go in there? Okay. So if you look at the left-hand side, it is basically the engineering information. So you have the CAD model, the isometrics, if it's like piping heavy, you have the line lists, the cable schedule, the equipment list, and the index list. Now this is basically the engineering side on the left-hand side. But if you, as you go towards the right from top there, you have the fabricator status as well. Because once the drawing is issued for construction, it's issued to the fabricator and it's also issued to site. But normally there is no connection as to what is happening at the fabrication site as compared to what is happening at the actual construction site itself. So in order to bring that information into the virtual construction model is also key, so that you have a central source of truth. Then of course each EPC has its own project controls software. And then of course you have the scheduling tools such as Primavera or MS Project that helps you to plan and schedule your work, which needs to be brought in. Then of course you have the material management information, right? You know, many of the EPCs use material management information to be clubbed along with the CAD model. And then of course you have the safety assessments, the hydro tests, and the turnover systems. This information is basically coming from the field. So in the virtual construction model, you have information from engineering, from the fabricators, from your project controls, and from the field. And once it is there, you can then take decisions based on the information that you have. Okay? So many times, if you just go by the schedule, it almost lags the actual work at site by about 2 to 3 weeks. So it's important to color code the model based on the information that is available from site. So it tells you, and many of the people now use the status visualization, as we call it. So it tells you what was planned and what is actually happening on site, so that you have that visibility straight away. And if you realize that there's something going wrong here, then it allows you to take corrective action. Okay, now normally the work packages are distributed in a hierarchical way. So you have the main engineering work package, that is the overall work package, which then gets split into construction work packages. So you have major constructors who do the construction work packaging. And these constructors then basically create the installation work packages. Now this is actually then going on from the subcontractors to the crew level package, right? So the hierarchy is right from top to bottom. Now, in order to know what is happening at the WorkFace level, you need a totally opposite reporting structure. So you need to know what is happening at the WorkFace. That then gets reported out into the subcontractors, to the major contractors, and eventually the owner operators know what's happening. And of course you have automated tools in order to indicate what's happening on site. So if everything is green, that means it's going as per plan. If it is amber, that means you need to take corrective action. If it is red, it means it's slipping out of hand. So there are these early warning signs that basically get sent out based on the level of adoption that you have as far as advanced work packaging and WorkFace planning is concerned. Now, a typical productivity graph, and this is coming from the major industry institutes. They're saying the tool time or the actual productive time of a crew is only 32%. The rest of it is all unproductive time that goes towards just doing that work. So in order to basically reduce that, you need a tool such as the WorkFace planning tool. And what they say is if you even improve that productivity by 10%, okay, depending on which country and what the work ethic is and all that, this may vary, the percentage may vary, But if you can even improve that productivity by 10%, they say you can see a saving of almost 20, because labor is a major cost, right? So if you can save 10% on the labor cost itself, they say you can typically save up to 10% of the total install cost. So if it is a $1 billion project, 10% of that is a huge amount, right? So that's what basically they are targeting at. So, something that is quite alarming, but at the same time can be rectified by adopting the latest technologies. Of course, the CII research team has come up with a maturity graph, so to speak, as to how you can adopt advanced work packaging and workface planning. And they say the early implementation stage, even if you are at the early implementation stage, and they had a matrix of about 6 different criteria on which they measured. And even if you are at an early stage, they say there could be an improvement of around 10% straight away in productivity, okay? And as you move further into this, and I can just give you some time to read through the slide, as you move to the next phase, you would see that the maturity graph shows you a much improved matrix based on all these 6 criteria that they had set aside. Okay, but again, as I said, it is normally the approach that construction crew work uses the crawl, walk, and run approach. You can't just start running straight away. So a gradual approach to this is important. And of course, the last one is where you actually use a programmatic approach to everything, including creating of work packages, bringing in all the information together, and then having it in a virtual construction model, right? But all of this only will come true if you have a total paradigm shift in the way people think. So many a times we say it is just 10% technology, 90% sociology. So all your people within the organization should embrace that change, so that they should know why they are doing it and how best the steps that they take will eventually have an impact on the projects that they execute. Okay, so of course the benefits of advanced work packaging we've talked about, and I think safety also is a major thing. So safety performance, quality, contractor profitability, and stakeholder alignment. These are the major benefits that we can see from a typical implementation of advanced work packaging. Okay, we'll just talk about a case study that we did on Valero project, right? It was, as you heard in the introduction, one of the world's largest refineries. And what was the challenge? They had an expansion project. The total installed cost was about $400 million. They had to do it in 12 months. It was a fixed price contract, which is the case now. Every major contract is being fixed price. There's no time and materials anymore. And of course, they knew that the industry had a history of unpredictability. So what they did was they actually set a deadline, and it was almost written in stone that they had to comply and adopt and finish the work by a certain date. That was the challenge that they set. And of course, the solution, what was the solution? They embraced workface planning because they knew that if you have to bring about change, there had to be something different they had to do. So they actually paid for workface planning. They said, we will pay that extra amount, we will have consultants, we'll have people work on workface planning in order to implement that. And they created an environment of collaboration. Okay, there was a collaboration between their engineering, there was collaboration between procurement, and there was collaboration between the site people, so that they all worked hand in hand in order to achieve this. And the results were outstanding. They actually completed the project 1 week ahead of schedule. Okay, so the production started a week, because it was a 12-month duration, that was the maximum they could do. They finished the work on time, a week ahead of schedule. They increased the productivity and reduced the overall cost. There was significant amount of savings that they did. For confidentiality reasons, I cannot give you out the amount, but it was a significant amount that they basically saved on this particular project. And 1.6 million construction hours incident-free. I think that was the key as well. Not just to hurry and finish a project, but to finish it in a safe, efficient, and productive manner. Okay? So that I think brings an end to my talk. Thank you for listening.
The program I've been given says we're going to go straight into Liam, but is there any burning questions at the moment for Rodney? Because we've got a bit of time at the end, questions and answers. I have one, but I'll save it till later.
To the next. Okay, no worries. Thank you.
So I want to introduce Liam. Thank you, Rodney.
No worries.
So Liam Stitt is on the Queensland Committee, as you might have seen early on. Swapping microphones. He's managing director of a company called EsSCO. It's 15 years international consulting experience, facilitating and delivering unique projects. His principal strengths are in developing strategic concepts and translating these visions into reality. His ability to competently mix strategic understanding with operational drivers has been built around his formal trade and professional training. Underlying expertise is change management and business improvement, and he's a career spanning all segments of the supply chain. Liam's going to share his experiences working with some of the founders of WorkFace Planning Method. In addition, Liam will provide some case studies on refining, CSG, LNG, health and aged care, and accidental coincidence. Interesting. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, taking the time out before an important match for Queensland will go 3 up is a credit to you all. Okay, as Richard said, we're going to look at some case studies about workplace planning, and it's workplace planning that's occurring here in Australia, here in Queensland, here in the Stitt Basin, here in central Queensland. And in some respects, as my last point is an accidental coincidence, the whole reason that I'm involved in workplace planning came about really accidentally. My journey, I suppose, in understanding workplace planning started back in 2009, 2010, when we were engaged by a tier 1 miner to go in and explore some of their projects and understand what the productivity was. The craft time, as the Americans call it, or Australia, our productive tool time. What was the productive tool time across 4 or 5 projects? And we had a team of people on their sites for many, many weeks doing the observations, as you call it, to collect the data. And what we found was this, that the best possible project that we studied had a productive tool time or craft time of 62%. So that's when people were at the workface able to do work. Worst was 8%. So you can imagine going into the managing director and his team of executives after many, many weeks of collecting this data and sharing this news with them. What do you think their reaction was? I'm a liar. How did you come up with these numbers? And after some debate, I encouraged them to go and do the studies themselves using our formula. They went and did that and got, after many months, rang me and said, we got the same results as you did. And I said, isn't that interesting? Now let's find out what the problem is instead of taking the blame approach. So what our observations were that where productivity is high, coordination delays are low. Where productivity is low, the coordination delays were high, and obtaining tools and material has a major impost. Typically, crews love to drive around, and I can give you many examples of what we found when we did the same work up in the Stitt Basin, and I got the IVMS data for a crew. We could tell that they were going back to Dalby every day at about the same time in the morning, and that was to get the coffee or the pizzas, we're not quite sure. So travel is a thing that crews love to do. And then lastly, we identified that in the new piece of work in every project, 25 to 30% of their initial startup time irrespective of how large it was just getting all the safety parameters and all the compliance requirements in place so that the crew could actually do what they were supposed to do within that framework of compliance. It was from this that I said, I need to know more about this because this is something new to me. I've never done this sort of work before. I've done it in manufacturing. We've done it in supply chain environments, but have never got the ruler out and measured construction. And we also measured some maintenance sites as well. So I then did some research and got data from the Maintenance Excellence Institute out of North America, but I also found WorkFace Planning. And it came out of the Construction Owners Association in Alberta, where they did some studies back in 02 and 03, and I got a copy of the very first research report. Sorry, I jumped ahead. What we found was there was a big break in the studies we were doing for the miner. There was a big break in their integrated planning. They had a 12-week planning in their big program schedule, but it collapsed really once they got from below 12-week down to execution. The consistency of the information wasn't there, it wasn't arriving to the work crews. It was a very big disconnect in this point here. There was no alignment between what the schedule and the program said and what the crews were actually doing was the root cause. So as I then said, I then followed my intuitiveness and my intrigue about what all these numbers mean and why is this occurring. The Maintenance Excellence Institute in North America says that where you have unplanned work sites, you'll get about 35% productive tool time. We got on average 37. And then I found this article that was put together by this research paper that was put together by the Construction Owners Association of Alberta. And some of the key architects in that were Lloyd Rankin and Jeff Ryan. The student that did the research was Tim Slootman, and Tim had come to Canada from Norway or the Netherlands to do his research. And I tried to contact him, couldn't get him, but I found these other names, contacted them, and lo and behold, these guys have got very successful businesses facilitating these workplace planning and advanced work packaging in Canada and in the States. And it turns out that Jeff Ryan worked with Bentley on the Valero project, and I was just talking to Jeff the other day about that whole project. And Jeff comes out to Australia quite regularly because he's an Australian guy. So I went over there after getting hold of their paper and 37% tool time. You know, the sort of data you were showing before, this is what their research found. And they typically found a whole heap of issues for the foreman. So it was always the foreman's responsibility to address the productivity problems or get the schedule back on track. But the foreman really didn't have the capability to actually change anything because he was continually in a reactive mode. So the research then found that for us to improve productivity in a project, we've actually got to work on why is the foreman being totally consumed in doing all this other non-productive work and not being productive. We've already seen this definition, so I won't go through it again. But quickly, I've got a few slides that Jeff shared with me about the essence of workplace planning and how you can arrive at that outcome for your projects. And basically, they use all the 7 levels in a project planning tool, and they use the 7th level right down to programming punch lists and any of the turnover requirements. But you can see they're using the full 7 levels. What I see in Australia when I work with companies, they certainly don't go down to the 7th level. Some operate at the 5th level. Some don't even get to the 5th level. And that's a key thing, that your schedules should be detailed sufficiently and linked using all the levels at your disposal in your planning tools to arrive at the outcome that you want to seek. Also, it's very much an integrated flow chart in terms of the way the planning sequence works in the relationship between the workplace planner, material management, project controls, the foreman and the crew, etc. So there is a formula or there is a process that you create to follow that. I discovered all that when I was there. Very strict timelines around the way that we actually relieve the constraints for the implementation work packages. So it's a discipline, it's a management discipline you follow to actually get into this workplace planning process. And a very, very clear focus around material management. And it's interesting that one of the lead mentors in the research project, Lloyd Rankin, was a university lecturer for 20 years and lectured in supply chain. So he took an approach about the right material for the right people at the right time so they can do their job. So there's a whole piece of work around materials management and supply chain that really dovetails into the WorkFace planning approach that ensures that the people at the workplace have got everything they need to do their job. So there's a very clear focus on material management and timing around that, and your long lead time items, and it's actually sequenced to a work pack, not just sequenced to a purchase order. And then the steps you go through to make sure the packs are unconstrained to get yourself into a place where you can give the work crews an implementation work package that is unconstrained. So the message here is there's a disciplined approach, a structure to follow on a time sequence that if you do embrace that, you'll deliver a higher productivity outcome, and you'll get a safer, higher quality outcome. And right down to the daily planning for the foreman is incorporated in the WorkFace planning approach. I won't touch on that, we saw that in the earlier slide, but I will mention that advanced work packaging is the next level of development, or next iteration of WorkFace planning. WorkFace planning was the initial initiative that came out of the research in Canada, and they went on their way to follow that methodology. Then the Construction Industry Institute they're based in Texas. In Texas, looked at it, did a whole piece of research, and were so impressed. Within 7 years, they've given it a status of a best practice technique in construction in America, and they've taken it to the next step and called it advanced work packaging. So the two go really hand in hand. Okay, having that knowledge, so I've stumbled into it, we've done some productivity studies, saw some bad results, wanted to know more, went off to Canada, found out all of this stuff. From there, we've done some more projects here in Queensland. And we went into, in 2012-13, we were invited into one of the CSG LNG proponents who was having some issues with the well site facilities being put in place up on the Surat Basin. And the well site facilities are the little bit of kit that goes on the bore that gets the water and the gas out. They have a limited life. They might only last a year or two. Once the gas has run out, they pick them up and relocate them and do it again, or put new ones in. By the time the LNG CSG industry has come to an end in Queensland in 25, 30, 40 years' time, there'll be something like 30,000 of these wells up on the Surat Basin or in the Bowen Basin. At the moment, there's about 3,000. So it's one part of the construction sector that's here for the long term, or 30 odd years anyway. And I'm now lucky to have worked with two of the proponents. So we went in to understand what their issue was, and their issue was it was taking too long to complete a well. So I went in with the kit of tools that I'd picked up when I was in Canada, and the first thing is I understood all the actors in their planning cycle, because as you can see from the earlier slides, unless you understand how this is structured and sequenced and who provides the inputs and the outputs to each step in the process, you have no chance of improving the life of the people at the workplace. So they had all these actors doing different things based upon inputs and outputs from each other in their planning process, and it was disconnected. We then mapped their planning process to understand what the sequential steps were, because we had to understand the sequence. So there's lots of steps there to build a small kit, which was quite surprising to myself and to others in the organisation. And then using some Six Sigma approach, we actually mapped the cycle times between all of the wells they'd completed at that time, and you can see the duration went from 900 days down to 30 days. So there was variation galore. It wasn't a consistent standard process. So that was quite intriguing. We then did some tool time studies with them, and we'd got their data and found that they were up around, it's a bit hard to see, but 48, 50. So typically they were at 50%, which was good in the scheme of things compared to what's not best practice. They were at 50%, and we saw once again that compliance, crew travel and obtaining materials was costing them nearly 40%. So as you know, in value stream mapping, there's value add, non-value add and business value add. There's about 10% of a crew's time I would declare to be business value adding, because they must do these compliance activities so that they show that they're meeting the standards and getting permits, etc. But they still had 40% of their time that they could improve. Knowing all that and addressing the issues, this has been the journey for this organisation. When we first started looking, They were taking about 1,350 hours to complete a well site. Once we helped identify the issues, by January, within 6 months or so, they were down to about 750 hours per well site. They're now actually just above 400. And the last piece of work we did with them, we believe will get them to 200 hours by using a modularisation techniques as well as all the efficiencies that they've gained. And these efficiencies aren't just productive workers at the workplace. This involved transport techniques, logistics techniques, materials management techniques, all of those things, by driving them in a coordinated, sequenced way, as Rodney said, allows the crew to be more efficient. So what came out of the whole process wasn't just hours at the workplace. There was hours out of all the support activities as well disappeared, and they're very much aiming for that. And we're building, the red thing's not working. They're building these prototypes as we speak. We did the business case and all the financial analysis last year to support all of this. We're currently involved with this client here in Brisbane that's doing a similar exercise, but they're embracing a technique called flexible well factory. And when they first spoke to me about that, I said, well, that's interesting, better go and do some homework. But it's very much an integrated approach between workplace planning and lean construction. And some firms in America that have been on the flexible well factory now for a few years, and their construction firms are winning lean manufacturing awards in the States because they've applied it so well and getting such wonderful results. But why this exists is that in conventional oil and gas, they're typically large resources with large wells that stay in place for a long time to pull the resources out. Whereas with unconventional gas, and coal seam gas is unconventional, they're little wells that get moved around a lot. So it's not just let's build one and hope it works in all situations, because it doesn't. Because the geology of the well, the flow rates, the black pressure, how much water's in there, how much gas is in there, what's the contaminants of the gas, the RL, etc., that leads to all the pressures in the circuits, governs the design of the actual well site facility. And you don't get that until you've actually drilled the well. So you need quick and rapid responses to these engineering changes as they occur once you've actually gone out and done the well. And the goal is, once the well's down, you want to get the MC1 and PC1, practical completion of the well site, as quick as possible, so you can get the gas back into your system and keep the big LNG trains up on Curtis Island full. So, and understanding that was a different approach, and Schlumberger is the model that they want to follow. So doing some research about Schlumberger, this is how Schlumberger described their flexible well factory model. And it's actually, there's an appraisal factory and an execution factory. So these people work out the inputs for the design, and this group go and get it to happen. So they're challenging fundamental aspects now about organisational structure and silos, decision-making, information sharing, which fits nicely with workplace planning and lean construction, because that's what it's founded in. It's about sharing this information so that people can make better decisions in a timely way. So you've got to embrace, in this model, you've got to embrace standard manufacturing approaches with this new flexible well factory approach to deliver what they're seeking. And ultimately what they're seeking is that, which is no different to how workplace planning started. They're taking up to 100 days to complete some of their developments, and they've got a project kicking up shortly, once we finish this piece, to look at how to get 100 down to 10. So there's a belief in that organisation, that's the type of opportunity that they can gain. How we're helping them there is we've started off by doing a massive end-to-end value stream mapping process for them. We've been focusing on the deliverable packages and the stage gate, so we can understand what's the information required for decision making and prioritisation. We've applied the SIPOC approach there to understand supplier input, process output, and that's a good way to capture this info. And we're at a stage now where we've just produced them an end-to-end flexible well factory value stream map for their whole business. From there now they've got to go on to this journey of, understanding the benchmarks and the research that's out there to help them make the right decisions so that they can achieve the end goal of that 100 days down to 10. So this is a work in progress, this project. It's real time, happening as we speak. Doing some work with health and aged care, and I've met this organisation. I lecture in these topics at the University of Queensland, and the managing director was on one of our courses, and I've since been engaged to work with them. But we're very much focused on waste reduction and prototyping. Once again, this is a Brisbane-based firm operating in Mackay, Townsville, Mackay, Brisbane, Ballina. And they've done studies themselves to measure waste in materials on their sites, and I've encouraged them to do studies around time, and they've gone and done that. And following the same model that WorkFace Planning uses, we've got them into a short-term programming methodology or process. They're talking 1 full 8, 12-week plans, and they've got short-term plans for both the construction site and all of the off-site works, and they're tracking that. And one thing I was saying to Richard earlier is that I'm not one to encourage people to learn all the terminology from these other areas and be experts in quoting words. It's about making sure that these solutions fit your business. And interestingly, in their quality system, they had a terminology called short-term programs, but they've never had a template. They've never had a training session. They've never used it. So we're using the WorkFace planning model for them to follow the short-term programming methodology, and it's working extremely well. The first project we intervened on was a project that was running well and truly behind schedule in Mackay. We did the training on site in the crew room with the people, and during the training they created their own short-term programming templates, and literally within a few days they could see they were starting to get the program back on track. But what it did do was highlight a whole heap of other deficiencies in their procurement and materials management space, but we expected that. And the last thing they're looking at is prototype rooms. So they're even looking at, because an aged care facility is one room typically done 50, 100, 200 times, is they're building the prototype room up front, getting sign-off from the operators and the nurses and the clients, etc., and also getting the subcontractors and the vendors and the suppliers in there, working on that room together up front. Sometimes even before the slab's poured, they've got a room done, and they're actually doing this level of collaboration to make sure everybody's processes are aligned to deliver the outcome that they want. And the outcome that they want is they want to reduce physical waste. And this is unheard of for a construction firm that's got this vision, so they're a pleasure to work with. And this is my last little case study. As I said before, I lecture in this with the University of Queensland in their executive education in the business school. And they've got a large international construction company that they run a program for and have been running this program for many years. And we were delivering it in Sydney last November, and I started talking about workplace planning. And two of the young people on the course said, well, we're on this project in WA, and we're using this technique, but we don't know where it came from. We were forced to use it because the owner is Chevron, the principal contractor is Bechtel, and they're saying, we want you to do it. You've got to do it. So they did it, and they followed it. And they said, and I spoke to the director, the finance director about this as well, because we had dinner with him during that week, and he said without a doubt it was the most productive project outcome they've ever seen, and they got 58% typically on that project, doing something that they were forced into, didn't know, that there was no reason or logic for it, but they followed it because they were contractually bound, and were getting paid for work packs, and that's something we haven't touched on, but a lot of the big projects in Canada and whatnot now, the contractors are being paid by completion of a work pack, so it's like a purchase order. So they've taken it a long, long way. So they were even getting paid by completion of work, preparation and completion of work packs, and said without a doubt, it was the best project that they've had in a long, long time. And as I mentioned before, the other coincidence is that Jeff Ryan, the colleague of mine that I met in 10, and I've had him out here in Australia speaking at other events, and that we're working together on, and he shares a lot of the intellectual property, was actually involved in the Valero case study that you just heard the results on before. So there's another coincidence. But when I did my masters, I studied under Professor Dexter Dunphy, and he's a preeminent change agent based in the University of Sydney. I think he might have might have since retired. But he said if change is afoot, you can sense change, but there's fractals starting to occur. And to me this week, I've nearly felt like after 5 or 6 years of being passionate about workplace planning and what it can do for a project or for a firm's construction activity, up to 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I was talking about this and no one had a clue what I was talking about. Whereas now there's a conversation about it. I think that's quite exciting. So, benefits, it forces you to start with the end in mind. So you actually work out how am I actually going to deliver this being fully productive at a certain date and time so that the client gets the return on their investment when it was promised. It also, without doubt, from my experience and what I've said and what we've already heard, the productivity gains are quite significant. From a supply chain point of view, it's very pleasing that there's a big, strong focus on materials management. And when I was in Canada, the guys were kind enough to take me around to do some site visits, and they took me to a technology firm that has great RFID tracking for components that go into a project. And remembering this 6 years ago, whereas RFID in projects is sort of getting more commonplace, and I said to them, why is it so important? And they said, well, under 6 metres of snow, you can't find anything. So technology over there was a requirement for them to actually find the materials when they were building things, whereas I was always looking at it just from a straight productivity gain. But they said, no, look at the practical aspects first, and then from there you'll get the productivity gain. So you can't find stuff under snow. So materials management gets a higher presence. It improves communication through focused and visible management practices, so it embraces some of the lean principles around visible management. But the fact that it's got a structure that's deep and sequenced around time leads to good communication because everyone's got a train of thought around that conversation structure and it gets people focused on what you need. The constraints are reduced at the workplace, and that's a big thing, that work is given to the workers so they can complete it, not frustrate them. And it's the frustration and the safety are the things that go hand in hand, and that's well researched. So if you give them a fully or an unconstrained, I call it fully resourced work pack, they don't get frustrated, you can expect them to be a lot safer. And the other thing, and very much what Bentley produces, is increased standardisation leads to automation. If you get underneath some of this and look at the transactional activities that occur in a project, I've been involved in developing some compliance and workplace planning software. And if I just give you safety for an example, typically what we've found on most construction projects, the number of permits, licenses, competencies, verification of competencies and other tickets that a person must have on a construction site averages about 40. So if you've got thousands of people that have, on average, 40 competencies that must be maintained and current for the duration of the project, that's a requirement under workplace health and safety. So if they're working at heights, they've got to have a current ticket and be trained and inducted and using all the right gear in working at heights. It's a prescribed activity or a high-risk activity. It's got to be current. So if you've got thousands of people, by 40 competencies they've got to be managed, you're starting to talk about 40,000 plus transactions just for safety compliance of people on the construction site, let alone the drawings and the comms and version control and everything else that goes into it. So the more sophistication and standardisation that comes into it, the result is that you can deliver more automation around the transactional elements as well. And that's a quote from the Construction Industry Institute themselves, that they've got no doubt it leads to productivity increases and predictability. Okay, here's something that I found when I did my masters, and I try and live by it. So every time you look at something, look at it with a fresh set of eyes, because you never know what you might find. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. That was fascinating. There were two, before I ask my question, are there any other questions in the audience at the moment? Yep.
Just a question for Liam. So the work you did, I'm a commercial construction contractor.
Yep.
Quite interested in workplace planning. So the work you did with your contractor in the commercial sense, did that, you said you went to site. Who was your communication with? The principal contractor, subcontractors, design team involved?
All of the projects we've been engaged in, we've been engaged by the principal. And with one of them, where I've now been with them 4 years, after the first piece of work, the constructor said, we might engage you from here on in, and I'm working directly with the constructor now, but that's only one example. All the rest of them, the principal brought us in to help identify the problem. It's as I said, this conversation is just starting to happen. It's not, I've been banging on about this to anyone I can in the last 5 years here in Australia, and as I said, we brought Jeff out and had him speak at conferences, and the level of interest has been, in the last 18 months, I'm fully occupied just doing this work now. So there's been a rapid turnaround. So it's typically been the principal has seen the need. I've gone and knocked on the door of a few big constructors and tried to get them open to this thinking. I was virtually this year about to jump on a plane to Darwin, up there in the LNG trains being constructed up there, because one of them was having severe difficulties in doing a repeatable task. And then I think they thought about it, and some of the issues were quite mundane. They should have been able to fix it themselves. So once they heard I'd been engaged to go up there, some of the project team held some of their own workshops and addressed the issues and I think solved their own problems. So it's, I'm sensing the need is and the awareness is growing.
I'm interested, so when you went and you said you went to a particular project and, and sort of intervened early in the piece, so who were you speaking with?
Well, typically I was given, say, half a dozen people, names, and invariably found they didn't know anything that I needed to know, and I just kept on going until I got all the people I needed to know, and that took me about 3 weeks to find the people who actually know what's going on. Because a lot of people think they know, but you interview them and they quickly know, we don't know that, we don't know that. So, look, I spoke to, I don't know, probably 30-something people. Went out to the supply bases, went out to a construction site, got data, interviewed as many people as I could, process mapped as much as I could, got them to validate things. So it was nearly a case of, it was like going shopping without a shopping list. I had to go and get as much as I could to actually make sense of this, because these are big beasts. We got as much as we could to make sense of it. Once we could make sense of it, we came back in and on the first project anyway, and said, you need to run this like a car manufacturing plant, because not every weld's the same. They've all got different specifications. So you've got different model variants in this make of car. And what's missing, and your diagram says it beautifully, it's MRP. If you've got a manufacturing background, any complex manufacturing facility or arrangement has a material requirements planning engine piece of software. And it handles all of the inputs by required dates, because it's got a lot of sophistication. In my mind, to put it simply, what this is doing for construction is giving them an MRP engine. It's helping them to become more like a production line. But they must know all the information and know how to use it as an input to their process. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions? My question relates to the similarity in the two diagrams around tool time. 32%, 37%, and actually there was one statistic on both diagrams that was wait time. That in yours was 17% and yours was 15%. But I also noticed when you got up to 58% tool time, that it was mostly the wait time that had disappeared.
Yes.
Is that the first place that you go looking? Is that efficiency of well, the not waiting, presumably that's because you've got the better material supply arrangements, etc.
Yeah, I can take the mic. Yeah, I think, yes, that's the key area where you basically try and reduce that wait time. Like when I said, on most of the projects you have these installation work packages that are created, and all that includes is the drawings, the tasks that need to be performed, and basically who would perform these tasks, right? That is to be the basic information that went out. But now what they have done is, before you can even issue that installation work pack to site, there are a list of criteria that need to be first fulfilled. So first to check whether the scaffolding is available for that site, whether all the safety regulations have been met. So all these basically get checked out before you can even then hand it over to site. So what they do is, and of course to take it a step further, they also have what they call it as a look ahead planning. So they ensure that there is at least 6 to 8 weeks worth of work that is already been cleared of all its constraints before they can say, yes, we can start work now. So there's an 6 to 8 week look ahead plan that needs to be achieved so that when the job is issued to site, all these constraints have already been addressed.
And I think, Richard, to add to that, when you start, if you've just got a gut feel things aren't right, the way to go through the process, and Jeff and the guys in America do this as part of their business, is go in and do a till time study. And you've got to be careful how you do that. And I was personally involved, and pardon my language, but to get because we did it on contractors on behalf of the principal, we just asked them what pisses them off. And by listening to them with that first comment, they then allowed us to study their crews for weeks and weeks and weeks, where we had stopwatches, and it's putting them under pressure, but we said this is not a personal attack, this is trying to solve the problems. And what it did, all the waiting and the delays and waiting for permits and safety and is not the crew's fault.
Yes.
Because they then had the data to prove what they've been saying. So we had them on board quickly. And it was then a case of what else? What are you going to fix? So that's when we started the mapping process and looking at the integrated planning and all of those other elements, which is outside of the crew's control.
Yep.
That's when it gets hard. Getting the data, if it doesn't exist, is not hard. You can do it by observation. But once you've got the data, it really will just validate what the crews have been saying typically. And then you've got to go back into the organisations to find out why there are these problems. And as I said before, it's typically people don't like to collaborate with each other. And if they won't share it, put it into a system that shares it.
So how does the first conversation go to the client by saying, yeah, you only want to start this project in 2 weeks' time, but I'm telling you now you're not ready to start it in 8 weeks and finish 2 weeks early. Do they say,
Well, I think they all have by the fact that they invited everybody in, or invited us in to try and solve the problem. But what you've got to do is have the compelling argument and show them the whole story. And if they're bloody minded and they don't want to listen, all you do is point out what the damages are going to be at the end. It's a hard one.
Exactly. It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah. And typically the ones that constrain the process are old-fashioned constructors and goody two-shoes procurement and contracts officers are the two hardest they're the ones that can affect your productivity, because these control materials and this person controls how the site functions. Two key roles.
yes, Paul. There appears to be a fair similarity between WorkFace Planning and last planning. Rodney actually mentioned the concept of last planning.
Yes.
Look ahead programs and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
The thing that I don't see at the moment in workplace planning, maybe it's only because of what you've shown as opposed to the reality. Within last planner as a concept, there is the lessons learned.
Yes. Yes.
So forth. That seems to be missing from workplace planning, from what you've shown tonight.
Yep.
Is that the reality or not?
I think it's the reality, because on every project, we start off with a lessons learned file, and that starts off with a flat file to start with, ends up in a box file, ends up in a couple of box files, and then that gets thrown into the storeroom, and that's the reality. So what we do is, on the new project, we start another flat file again, and we commit the same mistakes over and over again. Now, with an automated tool, basically there's a element of knowledge capture as well. So what you do is basically study projects based on what was done, where it went wrong, and to capture that knowledge is the key. Not to keep it as lessons learned in a file or somewhere, and to be honest, and I'm sure Liam will agree to this, that you go to any person, any construction manager and ask him about his previous projects, he'll never talk about the failures. And that's a personal thing, that's something that they have learned and acquired over the years, but it is very hard for them to then share it with the rest of the others. So I think there has to be a mechanism to capture that knowledge and then to share it with others so that the same mistakes are not repeated over and over again.
It's not just about knowledge of things that are going wrong. It's identifying also improvement as you're going through the project.
Yes.
Okay, we started here, this is what we've done, this is the performance that we're getting.
Yep.
Right? But then we're starting to get into the process.
Yep.
And we're performing better. The reasons why we're performing better
Yep.
are identified.
Yep.
That's definitely in workplace planning, because that goes into ensuring the packs are unconstrained. And the example that I saw when I was over there, workplace planning is ideal when you've got 40, 60 or 100 repeatable events in a mega project. And what they do is at the end of the first work pack, that first module install or whatever we've got lots of them to do, they throw a team of people at that and debug it. So it can be drawings, it can be alignments, it can be componentry. So their objective is to have zero punch lists at the end of a project, and that's written into the workplace planning methodology, but I didn't bring that up tonight. And the other thing that I believe is the case, to deliver this in the States and in Canada, you've got to be an accredited project manager, PMI. I don't know which level it is, but I would suggest, because they all say this isn't to replace good project management techniques, this is to add to it. And if you're an accredited, under the PMI system, you should practice the learnings process as a matter of course. So I know that that's the case in the guys that I've spoken to.
When you're talking about sort of work packages being sort of completed and paid for, it sounds like it's also a bit of a combination of location-based management approach, whereby you get paid for 100% complete defect-free areas of work as opposed to the usual approach of best rates.
Yeah, it would do, and I'll give you an example of, we did the supply chain execution statement for Barrow and Gorgon for a joint venture that bid for it, and Gorgon had an area breakdown structure. It was all designed around an ABS, so our concept was to kit in Henderson, because there's no laydowns on Barrow, none at all, which was a part of the issue they had while they were 10 billion over. The supply chain got constipated. I suggested at Henderson we do a model of the ABS structure, and we actually kit to an ABS, so the deliveries on the Barrow could go straight to the ABS, not to the MOF and sit on the wharf but they never went with that model, because it meant they had to put the discipline in place in Perth before everything travelled up there. And they chose to go with whatever, and that's why it's 50 billion from 39 billion. It was all to do with supply chain costs, apparently. It had a huge impact. At one stage they had 1,000 truck deliveries late. They couldn't get it onto the island.
So it was one of the 65% of fails in Ed Merrow's book. We said we'd wrap up about now. We are going to have some drinks and some more food out there. I'd just like to thank Maria for organising the food and drinks and things, and for Rodney and Liam for presenting tonight and answering questions. So thank you.
Thank you.